We have the technology. We know the solutions. A global agreement is in place. It's now time to use your voice in the fight against the climate crisis. Join us for a journey around the globe as we focus on businesses, leaders, artists, and everyday people who are stepping up, speaking out, and fighting like our world depends on it. Because it does. This is 24 Hours of Reality. You too can be the voice of change, the voice of the future. Let your voice be the voice of reality.
Welcome, I'm Sarah Backhouse. Thank you for joining us for 24 Hours of Reality, Be the Voice of Reality. The signing of the Paris Agreement 2 years ago made it clear people all over the world understand the urgency of the climate crisis, and our leaders need to stay committed to fighting it. While real progress is being made, more must be done and faster in order to limit the worst effects. That is why we must all find our voice on the climate issue and fight for action. Travel with us tonight as former Vice President of the United States and founder of the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore, leads the way around the globe. We'll be focusing on the powerful ways activists are speaking up to empower and change entire communities and places where still more climate voices need to be heard. For the next 5 hours, we'll be live from our New York City home base, the Bridge at Cornell Tech, which is one of the most environmentally friendly and energy-efficient campuses in the world. We'll explore the solutions each region has at hand, the challenges they face, and how all of us can be a voice of reality to succeed in ensuring a sustainable future. For the next hour, we'll continue our journey by hearing from some powerful climate voices in the United Kingdom. Each hour, we've been sharing inspiring solutions already in place around the globe. These are stories of individuals or groups taking action at the personal, business, community, or political levels and having a real impact. In the UK, this is exemplified by communities of faith joining together with the facts of science to light the way for a brighter tomorrow. Take a look.
Around the world, everyday people are stepping up, speaking out and fighting the climate crisis like our world depends on it. Because it does. Every voice makes a difference. These are the voices of change, the voices of the future, the voices of reality.
Climate change is the greatest moral challenge of our day, for people of faith and of no faith. This is something that goes back to the Bible and to the book of Genesis and the stories of creation. But of course, the way of thinking about it is new in this generation. We're responding to the best of what scientists can tell us about what's happening on the Earth. As we now understand it, we human beings are causing climate change and global warming. It is a scientific, economic, political issue, but it's a deep spiritual and moral issue as well. What are the connections between our beliefs and values and how we live now? And that's actually quite a complex thing.
I think it's really important that the Church of England is seen as being in the lead for the fight for climate change, because people come here every day and they say their prayers. We're trying to make sure that our actions speak as loud as our words.
Shrinking the Footprint is a Church of England project to reduce our carbon footprint together by 80% by 2050, starting at 2007 and 40% reduction by 2020. Churches are difficult buildings, aren't they? Lots of historic buildings, large buildings, energy inefficient. So one of the goals of Shrinking the Footprint is to turn thousands of historic churches into energy efficient buildings.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.
We knew that we needed to do something that was going to speak about our concern for creation, for the environment. And someone almost joked once saying, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could put solar panels on the roof of a cathedral? And then we looked into it and discovered that we could. And that was the defining moment for us, that when we discovered that we could do this, we knew that we should do this.
Shrinking the footprint gets into our way of thinking about how we take care of the environment going forward. So our solar panels are part of the Church of England's commitment to hit that 80% reduction target by 2050.
Cathedrals have big footprints, not just because of being a large building, but because people come to them in great numbers. 500,000 visitors come to the cathedral here every year. In terms of energy needs, it's a huge operation. Lots of lights, hundreds of lights in the place. Our 350-year-old organ is powered by electricity. This nave has been here for almost 1,000 years. There were some big logistical challenges to be able to install the solar panels. The nave roof was never designed to have these here, and the weight is quite significant, so we had to redesign along the centre of the nave the parapet there so that they could be attached.
There are 150 panels. They've been designed to respond to the fact that we have shading from the tower and the buttresses, so different parts of them operate independently even when other parts are in shade.
They work actually off light rather than sun, which is a misconception by some, which is really good, particularly on a day like this. And then the power is stored in these panels, and then there is a long cable that goes right the way down to the crypt of the cathedral, and this is now providing 25% of the electricity needs of the cathedral, from powering a coffee machine or a kettle for someone's refreshment or in the coffee shop, to powering the organ. We can light over 80,000 light bulbs, and that's just in the first 12 months. People have commented on how they look as if they should be here. It is this marrying of the new with the ancient. And as you see it stretching out before us, it looks like the roof of a cathedral. Well, now the roof of a cathedral is doing some wonderful things.
Heavenly Father, we do come before you this evening and we want to praise you. Help us to be aware of your presence here tonight. Amen. Please take a seat. Holy Trinity Church is in Tulse Hill in South London near Brixton, and it's a very vibrant, dynamic community. There's something very special about what we're doing here. The fact is that by not using concrete in our foundations, we've saved over 70,000 kilograms of CO2. The original church hall had to be demolished in 1984. In fact, since before 1984, the church has had a need to rebuild that hall. We really struggled to find a good way of building, a way that cohered with our values and was inspiring. And when we heard about straw bale construction, we realised that that was the answer. So it's this side that needs to be nice and flat. Straw is an agricultural waste product. Most straw is just turfed back into the ground. It's been estimated that straw bales for 1 year in the UK could build 250,000 houses. When you build with straw bales, it's a bit like wearing a woolly jumper. They're breathable.
The tyres were to lay out the foundation and to make sure it's all stable. We're going to be using clay from the ground, which we've dug up to get all the trenches to put all the tyres in. It's all natural, it's got no chemicals in it or anything.
This kind of building is often called building with awareness, and I find that a very helpful phrase because it's thinking about the impact of what we're doing. We made these jigsaws so that the youngest members of our congregation could really get to grips with our project. These tiles are made of recycled plastic. They're called eco tiles. On the walls is lime render, which is carbon neutral and breathable. And on the other side of this roof, we have all our solar panels. It's going to be hugely more efficient.
It's made me think about climate change more than I used to.
Doing this, I kind of realised that it's really not that hard to start doing something that will greatly benefit the planet many, many, many years after.
Sometimes Christians think, why would I be involved in climate change? It's a political issue. I just say read Genesis chapter 2 verse 7. Then the Lord God took some soil from the ground and made a man out of it. It's an amazing thought, isn't it? We are creation, and creation is us. This is, of course, a small project on the global scale, but in the life of our church, it's pretty big.
We're making marvellous strides towards renewable energy, but we need to do even more. And it's going to be a constant process through the whole of this century. But of course, it raises the benchmark in terms of what we ourselves can do, not just in churches, but in our homes and other community buildings as well. The deep hope is that when you encounter difficulties, you can find within them the resources and the depth of energy to change. And I think there are some encouraging signs, but my God, we've got to work hard.
These are the voices of change, the voices of the future, the voices of reality.
Our next guest is business magnate, investor, philanthropist, and a strong leader in the fight against the climate crisis. Joining us via Skype in Necker Island, please welcome Sir Richard Branson. Richard, what are the conditions like now in the British Virgin Islands following Hurricanes Irma and Maria?
Well, thanks for this programme today. What's happened is infrastructure right across the BVI, including communications, power and running water, were all very severely impacted. We're now 2 months on. The situation has improved slightly, but there's still a very long way to go until the region can recover. Following the hurricane, we reviewed the ongoing situation, and we're now moving more from relief to recovery. And it's important that we set our sights on enduring solutions rather than temporary fixes, and solutions that are resilient. And I think really there are 3 areas we think we can make a real impact given our previous knowledge and experience: education and training, power, and environmental solutions. So in the near term, these 3 areas of focus are rehabilitating the schools, implementing of waste and recycling processes, and also repairing and installing renewable energy across all the islands.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the disaster recovery Marshall Plan that you're developing and what that will do to make the region more sustainable going forward?
Well, the people of many Caribbean islands are dealing with a lot of human suffering and economic damage. But amidst this suffering, their resolve is also fantastic. They're very resilient. They do not want to be passive victims in the face of natural disasters, but rather they want to be active participants in the development of climate solutions. And this is why the Caribbean leaders, together with partners from many countries, as well as the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, and the private sector have come together to establish the world's first ever climate smart zone. So this means affordable, clean energy, resilient households, coastal zones and infrastructure. It means secure communities with essential services. It means global benefits of the blue and green economies with island nations as testing grounds for literally a new global development paradigm. It's really important that we use this challenging time to not only rebuild back stronger and more resilient, but to turn the Caribbean into a beacon for the rest of the world on climate smart development. I mean, the effect of these hurricanes are like nothing I've seen before. It was complete and utter devastation. Along with our Virgin team on the ground, I traveled across the BVI in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, trying to assess what was needed most. And our teams provided resources and advice where we could, and they tried to use our network to bring support in as fast as was possible. And it shocked me how few structures were still standing. Whole trees had disappeared, and there was virtually no vegetation left. And it's still a very difficult situation. Well, immediately following the hurricane, Virgin Unite, Unite BVI and BLE launched the BVI Community Support Appeal to raise funds to support the needs of these individuals, both the families and communities affected. And obviously many of our Virgin companies also stepped up and offered support. Virgin Atlantic supplies, and also a group of volunteers went out to help rebuild schools. Virgin Care sent out nurses to help treat those who needed it. So as well as this, our teams already based in the BVI, who we mustn't forget have also been affected by the hurricane, are also there working on the ground, helping the region get back on its feet. And across the globe, I've been overwhelmed by the offers of support which have been offered to the BVI. But unfortunately, I still think more can be done to help the whole Caribbean. And I'm meeting with other leaders this week to discuss a collaborative effort to the recovery process. And this work is being led by Caribbean leaders. It's being supported by the World Bank, by the IDB and private sector partners with the aim of creating a coalition to craft an overarching plan that can mobilize international and local support for the rebuilding of the impacted Caribbean islands with much more resilient, much more low carbon infrastructure as rapidly as possible. We're obviously working towards meetings on the 11th and 12th in Paris with the aim of using this key moment as an opportunity for country pledges and financial support for the whole region. Commitments to achieving the coalition's priorities are being made by affected countries, multilateral institutions, by bilateral partners and the private sector. And so far, we have approximately 3 billion in commitments that have been made internationally. And the private sector will support the coalition by acting as investors, but also amplifiers and conveners while introducing a new DNA into this international undertaking.
You co-founded the non-profit initiative, The B Team, which consists of business leaders from around the world who are interested in promoting sustainability. Do you have a success story that you can share with us?
Sorry, somebody's got something my way. The B Team is a group of like-minded individuals, people like Paul Pullman, Ariana Huffington, and others who have got together to try to make sure that we can move the world into a clean world. We were all there in force at the climate conference a year ago with the elders, and I think the B Team helped a lot in trying to galvanize the Indians, the Chinese, and others to sign up to the climate commitment. Obviously, there's now a white elephant in the room, America, but fortunately, the rest of the world and most of the American states realize what needs to be done. And the meeting, the anniversary of the climate change talks in Paris in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully we can move things forward in a positive way.
In general, how do you see the role of the private sector in leading the charge on sustainability reforms when governments may be slower to respond?
The private sector are full of wonderful entrepreneurs who are coming up with wonderful entrepreneurial ideas to try to address climate change. The private sector are bringing the price of solar down. The private sector are bringing the price of battery power down. The private sector are bringing the price of wind down. The private sector are coming up with ideas to have floating windmills, not just windmills attached to the bottom of the sea. The private sector are looking at ways of actually, sucking carbon out of the Earth's atmosphere. So, it is entrepreneurs that ultimately, I think, will come up with the ways to try to save this world. But it would help if governments could actually create a framework within which we entrepreneurs could work. Although I own an airline, I still think a carbon tax, a global carbon tax, is very important in order to spur on the revolution that's needed to get to carbon neutrality by 2050.
And finally, Richard, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs looking to start a sustainable business or to start an organisation to utilise renewable energy?
I would love to be able to answer that. I couldn't hear you. We still got some windows broken from the hurricane. Can you say that again?
Absolutely. I'm curious to know what advice you might have for entrepreneurs who want to start a sustainable business or take advantage of opportunities in renewable energy.
Oh, I would say jump in there with both feet. I mean, the biggest revolution in new businesses is going to be clean energy. I mean, the 20% of most of countries' resources go in energy. Most people's resources go in energy. And if you can come up with breakthrough technologies that will help turn that energy into clean energy, you'll make a fortune and you'll save the world. So, so the more people that can get into starting companies to try to make buildings more efficient, starting companies to try to have breakthrough technologies in clean energy, the better. And if they make a fortune, they deserve to.
Inspiring words indeed. Thank you very much for your time, Sir Richard Branson.
Climate change is our biggest challenge yet. The world's getting warmer, seas are rising, and our weather is getting more and more dangerous. Our planet's future is in our hands. We must and can act and lead the fight to a clean energy future. All across the planet, climate reality leaders are doing just that. They're inspiring people to stand up and take action when it matters. You can join them, become a climate reality leader, and learn what it means to lead a world-changing movement. You'll train with former Vice President Al Gore and some of the best scientists and influencers out there. You'll learn the latest on climate science and solutions, and learn how to share it with a message that moves audiences to act. You want to make a difference? Become the world changer you know you can be. Become a climate reality leader.
The climate crisis has hit home with devastating effect, disrupting people's lives and livelihoods everywhere. At the Climate Reality Project, we're empowering people across the planet to become powerful forces for change, fighting for climate solutions at every level of society. We train citizens to become climate reality leaders, dynamic activists who train and work with former U.S. Vice President Al Gore and field-leading experts to mobilize their communities for action. Around the world, our branch offices and local chapters bring climate reality leaders and concerned citizens into the fight for a sustainable future. Like in Brazil, where our activists pushed government leaders to ratify the Paris Agreement in the midst of political turmoil. Or in India, where grassroots efforts helped train 3,000 teachers on the climate crisis. Our 100% Committed campaign gives people a voice in their energy future, encouraging cities like Park City, Utah, and schools like Colorado State University to commit to 100% renewable electricity. And each year, our 24 Hours of Reality broadcast invites millions to join an all-star cast of musicians, celebrities, thought leaders, and more as we direct the world's attention to protecting the planet we all share. Today, as the United States begins a process to withdrawal from the historic Paris Climate Agreement, this work takes on heightened urgency. Now more than ever, we've got to fight like our world depends on it, because it does. Join us as we make our voices heard, as we demand that our leaders take action, and together, we'll make a bright and sustainable future a reality.
And now, please join me in welcoming the man whose voice continues to lead the charge in educating and inspiring action on the climate crisis. The founder and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, former US Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We're in the home stretch now, and thank you for all of your wonderful hosting. I really appreciate it. So in this hour, we're going to focus on the United Kingdom. And I'm going to start, as I always do, by setting the only relevant context. The planet that is now in danger, or at least the conditions that have given rise to the flourishing of humanity, are in danger. And the three questions we've been focusing on about the climate crisis are: must we change, can we change, and will we change? And in addressing that first question, must we change, I think it's appropriate to start with this image of the sky taken from the space station, revealing its true nature. When we stand on the ground and look up at the sky, it seems like a vast and limitless expanse, but as this image shows, it's actually an extremely thin shell surrounding the planet. And we're using that as an open sewer for all of the gaseous waste of global civilization. We're putting 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into it every single day, and that's trapping a lot of heat. The sources of this global warming pollution are numerous. They include agriculture, particularly animal agriculture, mining, the burning of cropland and forests, and other sources. But by far the major source is the CO2 emitted when we burn fossil fuels, as we do every day for 80% of all the energy the global economy consumes. And all of that extra CO2 has been mounting up and trapping heat, and that's the reason why global temperatures have been rising so dramatically in recent decades. In fact, 16 of the 17 hottest years ever measured with instruments have been in the last 17 years. The hottest of all was last year, the second hottest the year before that, and the third hottest the year before that. And we are seeing high temperatures in England, as we are in virtually every part of the world. This last June had an enormous heat wave in England, with the hottest June day in 40 years. Most of the extra heat that's being trapped in the Earth system is going into the oceans, which cover 71% of the planet. And when the oceans are heated up, that really changes the climate balance. By the way, half of this increase has been in the last 20 years, so this is accelerating. And when the oceans heat up, the storms get stronger. This was just 6 weeks ago in England. At the end of that unprecedented string of hurricanes in the Atlantic, one of them went all the way north to Ireland and across to England, and the straight line winds were really quite dramatic, ripping the roofs off some buildings. And it wasn't a hurricane by then, but these unusual storms are becoming much more frequent. So when the oceans heat up, we also see a disruption of the water cycle, because much more evaporation from the ocean is lifted into the sky, and the warmer air holds much more water vapor. So when it comes over the land, it falls in larger amounts in a shorter period of time. So we get these massive downpours that do damage to infrastructure. This was the largest rainfall in the history of the United Kingdom, a little bit less than, well, just almost exactly 2 years ago. 34 centimeters or 13 and a half inches of rain in 24 hours. And by the way, I love the phrase, there'll always be an England. The pub here stayed open, and the inside of that window is just about as clean as you can get it. I love that. I love the spirit of that barkeep. The reinsurance companies are keeping close track of these climate-related extreme weather events, and they're breaking all kinds of records. And the coastal areas are threatened by sea level rise because the ice is melting in Greenland. This glacier is gone now. And NASA has measured very precisely the decline of the ice pack in Greenland. The same thing is now accelerating in Antarctica. Here's an example of the damage to coastal areas. This one in East Yorkshire, England, just last year. The doctors are warning us that the climate crisis is also a medical emergency. We're seeing the tropical diseases move to new areas. Air travel is part of the reason, but the so-called vectors like mosquitoes and ticks are moving into a wider range, and the conditions where these diseases take root and become endemic are spreading to a wider area as well. The biologists warn us that the extinction crisis is, in their view, the worst manifestation of the climate crisis. We are now at risk of losing up to half of all the land-based species with which we share this planet. That's something we ought not to allow to happen. But these impacts of the climate crisis, along with others I have not mentioned in this short presentation, all add up to an unacceptable price. By the way, it's the #1 threat to the global economy also. So the answer to that first question, must we change, is clearly yes. What about the second question, can we change? Well, the good news is the solutions are available now, and they're coming at us much faster than predicted. The best prediction 17 years ago for wind energy was that the world would reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. Actually, we beat that projection 16 times over. And the wind capacity in the United Kingdom has been growing very rapidly. In Scotland, for the entire month of June this year, Scotland got 100% of its electricity from wind. And in the United Kingdom as a whole, they got more electricity from wind than from coal. And earlier this year in April, Britain went an entire day with zero electricity from coal. That's the first time that's happened in over 130 years. The progress in solar electricity is even more dramatic. The best projections 15 years ago said that we'd install 1 gigawatt per year by 2010, but in 2010, we beat that by 17 times over, and last year, we beat that by 75 times over. Solar electricity is coming down so rapidly in price that the installations are really going up. There's an exponential curve for you, and it's still climbing. This is the largest floating solar array in Europe at Walton-on-Thames. And on a global basis, it's worth remembering that we get as much energy from the sun every hour as the entire global economy uses for a full year. So now we're seeing a dramatic advance in battery storage. A new report was just released today showing that the cost of lithium-ion batteries went down another 26% compared to last year. This is what's been the growing capacity in the last few years, but it pales in comparison to the predictions of where this is going in the next several years, from 2.5 gigawatts to 125 gigawatts. That's incredibly impressive. It's a breakout. LED lights, one of the efficiency technologies, taking over the world lighting market, using only a fraction of the energy that old light bulbs used. Now we're seeing the phase out of the internal combustion engine in cars and trucks in many countries, and virtually every automobile manufacturer in the world is switching to electric vehicles. So can we change? Yes, we can change. We have the tools we need. They're getting better every day, and they're getting cheaper every day. So will we change? That's the main and most important question. And we have a very positive answer coming out of the Paris Agreement 2 years ago this month, when every nation in the world signed up to goals that would take global warming pollution on a net basis down to zero by mid-century or as soon thereafter as possible. And yes, President Trump said he wants to pull the U.S. out, but he can't do that legally until the first day after the next presidential election in 2020. And in the meantime, states and cities and businesses are meeting the goals on behalf of the United States of America. In London, there's a lot of grassroots activism, as there is here in the United States. And we need you to keep the pressure on. So use your voice and join those who are fighting the climate crisis. Make your voice a voice of reality and fight like your world depends on it. because actually your world does depend on it.
Welcome back to the social media corner of 24 Hours of Reality. I am back with my co-host, Van Ness.
What's good?
Now, we're using the hashtag 24 Hours of Reality on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you want to get one of your posts up on this broadcast, use the hashtag 24 Hours of Reality. Let's check out some of the posts.
Let's do it.
Okay, this guy has the coolest roommate. He knew that he was up all night watching 24 Hours of Reality, so he took a little nap, and his roommate left him bagels for some fuel to get through the next 5 hours.
That's a nice roommate.
What a great guy.
Yeah, I like this one actually. Christmas school decor made with recycled everything.
That's a great idea. I mean, the holidays are coming up. Not a bad idea.
Definitely.
Now, we had a little game going on. We had a hashtag war.
We did.
Because we asked you which scientist was on 24hoursofreality.org. So, it was between Bill Nye the Science Guy and Neil deGrasse Tyson. The results are in. And you voted. 60% said Bill Nye, 40% said Neil deGrasse Tyson. Should we find out the winner?
I think we should.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Wow.
Now, we actually have a technicality, because technically Neil deGrasse Tyson is featured on the Climate Reality site, but we asked about the 24 Hours of Reality site, and you guys figured that out. I just can't believe how much of a deep dive you guys did into this.
That's
so
very
remember,
passionate.
They're very passionate.
Very, very passionate.
It's unbelievable.
Thank you guys.
So remember, use the hashtag 24 Hours of Reality on Twitter,
Facebook,
Instagram, and there's a chance one of your posts could be up on the broadcast for the world to see.
Our next guest is a writer for The Guardian who is well known for his environmental and political activism. Please join me in welcoming writer and journalist George Monbiot, who joins us via satellite in Oxford. Welcome, George. I want to get started by hearing about what inspired your passion for environmental reporting, and specifically what aspects of the climate crisis do you cover?
Well, I was sort of there from the beginning. I don't know how, I don't know why, but even from my pram, I was fascinated by nature. I took my first environmental direct action at the age of 8. I tried to stop a tree being cut down which had a woodpecker's nest in it. I was an obedient boy. I went home for lunch, and when I came back, well, you can guess the result, and I learned quite an important lesson from that incident. And since then, the sort of scope of my interest has just expanded and expanded. So while climate breakdown, as I call it, because calling it climate change is like calling an invading army unexpected visitors, it's such a crazily neutral term for the existential crisis that we face. I see climate breakdown as part of a suite of massive predicaments that we have to engage with and have to engage with now.
What is media's role in communicating or raising awareness about the climate crisis, and what kind of job is it doing so far?
The media has been appalling. The media is not your friend on this. The great majority of the media is owned by billionaires, at least in my country, the UK. And what billionaires want is the opposite to what most people on earth want. They want a world in which they are released from the constraints of democracy. They don't have to pay tax, they don't have to abide by regulations, and they can basically pour their trash over everybody else and get away with it. That's what they're after, and that's what the newspapers exist to promote, that devastating world view. There are some little pockets of resistance within the media, but they are closing. And even within public service broadcasters like the BBC in the UK, it's really difficult to talk about the big picture. You can talk about particular aspects of it, but it's always within a very narrow and constrained frame, trying to sort of pull out to look at the real scale of the global crisis that we face. That seems just to be off limits. And I feel that the media are up there as guilty parties with the oil industry, with the coal industry. They stop us from thinking, they stop us from questioning, they stop us from recognising where we stand with respect to our multiple predicaments. And in so doing, they perform a grave disservice to humanity.
How would you assess citizens' appetite for climate coverage? And if so, what's the solution to communicating the message more directly?
Well, we have to get round the back of the media and round the sides of the media. I mean, there are a few outlets. I'm very lucky at The Guardian. I can do exactly what I want, write exactly what I want, but that's an incredibly rare position. I mean, I'm in a glass box. I can't move sideways, can't move upwards because there's nowhere else to go here. So we have to exploit the alternative media. And there are some fantastic alternative media outlets. I'm speaking on one now. I suppose you can call this an alternative. And it's great. You're doing great work. So are many people on both sides of the Atlantic trying to hold the billionaire climate change deniers to account, trying to alert people to the sheer scale of what we face at the moment. But, in doing so, you are pushing the rock up the hill. This is not an easy task because people are so schooled in complacency and indifference. We are taught to be complacent. We are taught to be indifferent because if we were otherwise, we would turn round and challenge those who are destroying our beautiful planet and the prospects of the people who live on it.
Well, following on that, you talk a lot about the denial industry. Elaborate a little bit more about what you mean about that and what the impacts of it has been so far.
Well, I first came across it about 10, 15 years ago when I was being bombarded by what I thought was hatred, really nasty messages, really sort of vicious stuff. And I thought, boy, these people hate me. Why do they hate me so much? I've never even met them. And then I realised after a while, as I began to dig into these people, who they were, where they came from, they didn't hate me at all. They were just paid to do this. There was a dark money network funded by Exxon and by other oil companies, as well as by a grisly assortment of billionaires and other corporations, a network that had emerged from the tobacco denial network. And the same players had just switched quite smoothly from one to the other. They'd basically pioneered the techniques in denying the impacts of tobacco smoke and then had just moved the whole show onto climate breakdown, denying the impacts of that. And as I began to look into this and discover just what a widespread network this was and how successfully it had penetrated the mainstream media, I realised we had a very substantial enemy in this movement. It's gone a bit quiet subsequently. It's sort of moved on to other things like crushing democracy. But the same players are still there and they're making a very handsome living by destroying everybody else's well-being.
We're looking towards solutions now. The media does provide a lot of information from great outlets like yours. What are the next steps in actually getting people to act? Can we be more, helpful in allowing people to do something to help solve for some of these challenges rather than feel perhaps overwhelmed?
Yes, it's essential that we create a framework for action, and I think that Al and the team have done tremendously well in doing that. We need to go a lot further. I mean, my own feeling is that one of the big steps we need to make, both for climate breakdown and for a whole suite of other environmental disasters and humanitarian ones, we have to switch from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet. This is absolutely crucial. We will not get through the 21st century, or rather, billions of people will not get through the 21st century unless we make that switch. Because we are contemplating an agricultural crisis, an ecological crisis, as well as the climate breakdown crisis, and it's being driven by the food that we eat and the way that it's produced. The world has plenty of scope to feed 9 billion, 10 billion, 12 billion people, but not if we're all eating steak and chicken and pork. We have to go to that plant-based diet. If there's to be any fair settlement, fair dispensation for the rest of this century, so that we don't have a situation where the rich can just pursue whatever desires they want while the poor die as a result.
George, very quickly, last question. How has the growth of social media impacted environmental reporting, both yours and broader in the industry?
Well, I'm a big fan of social media, largely because I have so many complaints against the mainstream media. I think it has helped to fill in some of the gaps. It's been tremendously effective at pushing out messages that the billionaires don't want to hear and don't want to be heard, but of course it is double-edged. And there's a real danger that you think you've done something because you put out a tweet or a Facebook post or a blog post, and actually we have to take it much further than that. Social media as a tool behind the tremendous activist organisations which have been so effective and so determined all around the world, it's a very powerful tool in their support, but by itself it doesn't take us that far. The key thing we all have to do is to combine with other people. We can't do anything by ourselves. We combine with other people. We don't let the billionaires atomise and rule, which is their technique for keeping us in our boxes. We get together and we change the world as a body.
George, thank you very much for your work and for your time today. Over the last hour, we've spent time getting to know some of the challenges faced by the people of the United Kingdom. In many ways, people are taking action towards a more sustainable future. Remember, the most powerful warrior in the fight against the climate crisis is you. There are many ways to make a difference in politics, in communities, in businesses, and in our own lives. Go to 24hoursofreality.org, get your climate action kick, and learn more now. How to speak to friends and families effectively about the climate crisis and other ways that you can be the voice of reality.
Climate change is our biggest challenge yet. The world's getting warmer, seas are rising, and our weather is getting more and more dangerous. Our planet's future is in our hands. We must and can act and lead the fight to a clean energy future. All across the planet, climate reality leaders are doing just that. They are inspiring people to stand up and take action when it matters. You can join them, become a climate reality leader, and learn what it means to lead a world-changing movement. You'll train with former Vice President Al Gore and some of the best scientists and influencers out there. You'll learn the latest on climate science and solutions, and learn how to share it with a message that moves audiences to act. You want to make a difference? Become the world changer you know you can be. Become a climate reality leader.
This is a critical moment in the fight against the climate crisis. Your voice is needed to make a difference. Join us this December for 24 Hours of Reality. We'll take a journey around the globe to focus on those who are stepping up, speaking out, and fighting like our world depends on it. Because it does. You too can be the voice of change, the voice of the future. Let your voice be the voice of reality.